Hey everybody! Welcome to CAF Warbird Tube, the show where we talk about World War II, aviation, history, and so much more. Warbird Tube is produced by the Commemorative Air Force, the world's largest flying museum. Our mission is to educate, inspire, and honor through flight and living history experiences. The CAF began the Warbird movement more than 65 years ago, and thanks to the support of individuals like you, we continue to grow strong. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and now our host, Steve Buss. Thanks for watching and keep 'em flying. Hey everybody! Welcome to CAF Warbird Tube, the show where we talk about World War II, aviation, history, and so much more. Warbird Tube is produced by the Commemorative Air Force, the world's largest flying museum. Our mission is to educate, inspire, and honor through flight and living history experiences. The CAF began the Warbird movement more than 65 years ago, and thanks to the support of individuals like you, we continue to grow strong. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and now our host, Steve Buss. Thanks for watching and keep 'em flying.
Good evening and welcome everyone. This is episode number 132 of Warbird Tube, and tonight, the story of the men who flew the B-24 Irishman's Shanty. We'll get into that in just a moment, but before we do, please do us a favor. If you haven't already done so, take a second to like, share, or subscribe and follow us. And if you do follow us on YouTube, make sure you click the bell icon and you'll get notifications about new episodes of Warbird Tube when they go live. And if you have done all those things already, thank you very much. We sincerely appreciate it. By the way, if you'd like more information about the Commemorative Air Force, our local units, the aircraft that we fly, or if you'd just like to join the fun, visit commemorativeairforce.org for all the details. Now, this is a very unique film, and I think you're going to enjoy what we'll show you tonight and just kind of whet your appetite for the final product. But joining me now are Alex Mena and Fiona and Justin Hall, who helped put this all together. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you.
Good evening.
Appreciate it.
Let's start and get a little background on each of you. Alex, let's start with you and maybe a little of your background and how you came to put this story together.
I've got about 30 years working in the Texas film and video production industry. Have been working for about the last 7 or 8 years as a producer. The concept or the idea for the film had been kicking around in my head for a while in the early aughts, and around 2005, 2006, it started to kind of form up into an idea and a concept. And it wasn't for a couple of more years after that we were able to finally start the process of making this movie. So we've been working on it for a while now. Still haven't finished it, but we're getting closer.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And Fiona and Justin, how about you?
Yes, so Justin and I, we both are filmmaking professionals. We both come from the UK, but we met Alex at the Dallas Film Festival, I think coming on 12 or 13 years ago now, and we were really compelled by Alex's story and what he wanted to create with this movie. And so we joined him really just to see how we could help, and it's been a joy to work with Alex and learn more about what he wants to put on screen, especially from an animation perspective, which is something that Justin and I have had the most experience in creating.
Yes. And Justin,
Yeah.
anything to add?
I've been an animator for probably 25 years now, professionally, working in various aspects of animation. But when Alex brought this to us and said that he'd wanted to do some animation, we jumped at the chance to do something meaningful and creative. And I guess for me, it was a challenge to create something myself, rather than always working from someone else's ideas. So I actually got to have a lot of artistic input into this with Alex, and that was a great challenge and excitement for me.
Awesome. And before we get into the unique aspect of the animation and live action that goes into this film, Alex, what's the backstory? Because this has a very personal connection for you.
Yeah. So in the photo behind me in the crew promotional poster is the crew photo. Photos taken on July 31st, 1944. This is the first crew to complete a 30-mission combat tour with the 492nd Bomb Group. And the guy standing at the far left is my dad. So he is literally the inspiration for this film. I decided that I wanted to make a film about his bomber crew, and he said okay, and that's how we made the deal. We signed the deal, if you will. But yeah, it's an interesting story. As you peel an onion, there's more stuff there, right? And so as I was doing my early research, it comes up that my dad's crew was the first crew to complete a 30-mission combat tour in what was statistically the most devastated American heavy bomb group of World War II, which was the 492nd Bomb Group, of which these men were members of, which was in turn part of the 2nd Air Division, which was part of the mighty 8th Air Force. So they were, statistically, there were other groups that were in combat for longer periods of time that probably lost more men and planes over that extended period. But in the short time that the 492nd was in action, which was only 89 days, they didn't even make it to 3 full months, they lost a ridiculous amount of men and planes. And so it's a story of this crew and some other people in other crews telling their story, getting to 30, while on some of these missions, it's just horrific loss. And so we tell the stories of some of those men as well. So it's really a history of the 492nd Bomb Group, as well as the story of my dad's crew, which is the O'Sullivan Crew 713.
Now, the 492nd, where were they flying their missions?
They were flying their missions where? They were flying to occupied Europe and deep into Germany itself. Yeah.
And of course, this is at a time when there was no long-range fighter cover for the bombers.
Yeah, there is coverage. They first fly their first mission on May 11th of 44, and so by that point, the Luftwaffe was kind of beaten, but it could still put up a fight when it needed to, or it would pick and choose its fights. And it just seemed like this particular group just was unfortunate in getting defeated on several key missions. Coming over, they were considered the most extremely talented, experienced crews. There was a lot of the men who made up the initial bomb group were made up of the trainers, the men who had been training the other crews stateside for up to 2 years, and they had put in for combat, and they formed this, for lack of a better word, a super group that was the talk of the 8th Air Force. I mean, Doolittle and his entire staff were saying these guys are the ones that are going to really, put the kibosh on the Luftwaffe. It didn't work out that way. So, yeah.
And not even, as you mentioned, not even making 90 days of being an active group was just unreal. And I hate to say it was bad luck, but the aviation gods were smiling upon this group.
Yeah, it was just the luck of the draw. They just happened to be going on some missions on several of their really, really bad missions. They had the fighter, the fighter hookup was supposed to catch them at a certain point and escort them into the target, and 5 minutes, sometimes as little as 4 minutes delay in making that destination in the sky, and that's all the time that the enemy needed to attack. So yeah, they lost quite a few men and planes on like 3 really bad missions that really sunk the 492nd Bomb Group.
Now, was your dad forthcoming, throughout your life, talking about his service at all, or it was more typical of what we hear of World War II veterans is they really didn't share anything until later in life, and you kind of had to draw it out? Right.
Well, just a small sample group myself, but what I found out was that there's 2 groups of veterans. There are the guys who are the lifers, the guys who their career didn't end in World War II. They continued on. My father was one of those guys. They called him back in Korea. They called him back in 50, and he ended up staying in Korea and Vietnam. So he retired in '68. So he was, you could ask him. He wouldn't bring it up, but you could ask him. You say, "Hey, Dad, what about this and what?" And he would let you know. He'd tell you about missions and what. But you'd have to ask him. He wouldn't give it up. Other veterans, of course, they compartmentalize it. They only served those 3 or 4 years, got out in '45, and went on with their life. So when we were interviewing a lot of these veterans in 2008, 2011, 10, and 12, the sons and daughters of these men would ask to sit in on these interviews. And they were like, they would pull me over afterwards and they say, "Oh my God, he told you stuff he's never told us." And I figure it's because I'm just an impartial person who's asking them questions, and they know the clock is ticking. These guys, when we interviewed them, were already in their 80s, right? Mm-hmm. So there wasn't a whole lot of time left for these guys. So they're pretty much unloading their souls, telling us their stories, which was really the backbone of the whole Crew 713 story, is these veterans telling these stories, and then we kind of fill it in with our animation pieces and other storytelling techniques. Yeah.
And your experience is very similar to others that I've heard of. I met an author earlier this summer who's done a number of different articles and books on different veterans, and he remembers telling one of the veterans he interviewed. He said, "I wish you would have told me this story 20 years ago. We could have done so much with it." And the veteran said, "I wasn't ready to tell this story 20 years ago, but I am now." And I think you're right, that sort of the clock is ticking, and it's time. And also being, like you said, an impartial person, you're not a family member. So the stories they tell, they're not worried about how you're going to react because they're just telling you the story. They may have a different feeling that telling that to their family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we did some research prior to doing our interviews. There's quite like 7 or 8 books that were written about the 492nd. So I would have my notes with me. Okay, we're going to interview this guy, George Worthington. Okay, George was a member of this crew. They got shut down on this mission, and let's ask George specifically about how his crew interacted, their life aboard their ships, and then what happened on that final mission when they got shut down and stuff like that. So we were able to draw this information out of them by basically just good research, basically just doing my homework. And when you approach them and ask them these questions, then they're sitting there going, "Oh, okay, you know about this. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you." And here we go. And some pretty amazing interviews that we got in 2008. We interviewed, I believe, 11 veterans in 2008 at the reunion in Minneapolis, and we got some really, really remarkable interview footage. Yeah.
So how long has this project been in your mind, and then how long has it kind of taken to get it moving forward?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. We started in 2008. Fiona and Justin came aboard in 2011, and it's just been a labor of love. There's been entire years, and that's just all on me, where the project didn't move forward. And we all have lives, we're all working in various industries and doing what we do. So it sometimes sits there, and then all of a sudden I go, let's talk about this. And then we would get together and let's hash out some ideas and let's edit some stuff. And so I think, Fiona, Justin, what do you guys think? But I would say that in the last year and a half, we've done a lot in this last year and a half than we probably had done, and maybe in the last 3 or 4 years prior to that. I mean, it's just the way it works. It's just the way it happens.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Alex. I think the lovely thing about this is being able to grow in the story, as Alex says, as Alex grew in learning about the history of the bomb group that started out with this origin story of learning about his father. We've grown with him and grown in interest and learning about how to really tell this story in a compelling way for an audience, whilst keeping the factual and historical record straight. And so as long as it's taken to do, it's grown in its depth and also certainly in our friendship with Alex. It's been one of the joys of being here, and we're here in Dallas, that we've got to grow together in making this film, but also in our friendship with Alex.
Awesome. Well, let's before we go any further, let's take a look at the trailer for the film and give folks kind of a taste of what we're talking about.
Okay.
Well, as you can see from the trailer, this is a unique way of presenting a story, and using the animation and recreations, historical footage, all that put together. Where did that concept come from?
When I first approached Fiona and Justin, they had just come off of working on The Illusionist, which had been nominated for Academy Award in 2010. Is that correct, guys?
2011.
2011. Okay, 2011. And I knew they were animators, so I approached them with the concept of, well, we don't have the money to do what's called photorealism, right? So Fiona and Justin came up with this concept of doing an animated graphic novel look to the animation, which would have in panels that would slide in and out like a comic book, right? And like as you're reading it in the comic, it's of course the panels are already there, right? But in the animation, you would start off with one scene, and then panels would move in, which were moving the story further via animation. And it was a really, really remarkable way of doing it. And I was like, okay, sold. Let's go forward with this. And Fiona and Justin had recruited another one of their friends who worked on The Illusionist, Damian Jones, who is the illustrator, and he pretty much illustrated I think every episode so far, right? He's done the illustrated pieces for us. Yeah, really talented guy. He also lives in, I believe, Manchester right now, and he's been like the fourth member of the crew, if you will.
Very good. Yeah, and using that concept of almost a graphic novel, is that something that you thought of consciously about how graphic novels are now appealing to younger audiences and how that might draw them into the story?
Yeah, that was a big part of it. One of the things that we wanted to do was to make this history accessible to a younger generation, a generation that we're seeing now is losing touch with that part of their history. And we saw this. Animation is nothing new to documentaries. It's done all the time. But as Alex said, it tends to be a photorealistic recreation or a graphic to demonstrate something very kind of dry and almost scientific in some instances. We wanted to make it more engaging, more interesting to that generation, which we see as slowly losing touch as their grandparents are passing on, as it seems to be less prominent in school history, just to open it up to that broad audience. And as we can see now, it's probably waiting this long to get it finished is quite useful and quite helpful to us if you look at some of the big movies that are coming out now with Spider-Man and the Ninja Turtles, doing a similar idea of taking a comic book look and putting it onto the screen. So I think we might be slotting into the genre at the right time.
Right. Plus, we're also hopefully coming in at the time with Masters of the Air is about to come out, and that's the third installment of the Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, mini series, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the history of the 8th Air Force, and so we're hoping that we can kind of ride the coattails of that series and get some publicity as well.
As you're putting this all together, what have been some of the challenges that you've run across in trying to tell the story?
I think I wouldn't say it's a challenge so much as it is translating the words of the men, because we were able to interview. I would say right now we've probably got about 13 to 14 veteran interviews, which is quite a lot from that bomb group. And then we came across a gold mine. There had been a previous production company which had interviewed a lot more of the men at a 2004 reunion, which we were not part of. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to find that footage, and they were gracious enough to let us use it. We digitized it, and we now have that footage available to us to help tell the story again with more veteran voices. But even then, there were some points where there's a dramatic moment in the movie, but it's only like a veteran's voice, like from one of the books, right? So we had gotten permission from all the authors who wrote the books that we could use anything in the book just in the film. So what we've done is we've slotted in that the words of that veteran, but we'll replace it with a voiceover of an actor. And so the way we do it is we will have the voiceover of the young man as he was then, but then when we interview the real veterans, they're old guys, right? So there's this kind of a nice back and forth between the veterans telling the story, and then you go back and there's a young voice telling the story as well. I think that's kind of a nice touch.
Yeah.
Other challenges just really include anything where you're trying to bring something from nothing. So what's in Alex's head, whenever you're trying to bring that to life, you have to do a lot of storytelling yourself. And so you have to pitch and you have to share your vision. And we're all doing this in context of other work and other experiences. And so continuing to keep the momentum of sharing stories where there are 100 other things that people can support. But what's been both a challenge and a joy is every time we shared the story and every time that we have just really brought to life what Alex's vision has been, there's been so much excitement and people have seen, yeah, that's a great idea. So both the challenge of sharing something from you and starting something from scratch, but also the joy that you get when you've actually been received and heard is really fun.
Yeah.
In the creative process for putting this together, traditionally you'd go with storyboards and things like that. I get the feeling this might be a more free-flowing sort of production.
We do have storyboards that we use for the animation pieces, which we were pretty loyal to that, and Justin can speak, and Fiona can speak to that. And then the script itself kind of takes a life of its own, right? And then, so you're here, and then you go, wait, maybe this doesn't work right here. Maybe we need to move it. And we've had a script consultant. Her name is Christine Switzer, and she has helped me get the script in a better form. And she's made suggestions. He says, well, why don't you put this section here and maybe move this over here and kind of just move stuff around. And it just get a better flow to it, which I think is helping to tell the story further. And as far as the animation pieces, I'll let Justin and Fiona address that. But they're doing a great job as well. I'm just happy with that.
Well, certainly from an animation perspective, Justin can speak to the storyboards, but it really is an evolution as you hear more about the lives of the men and how they might fit together. That combined with the extensive research that Alex touched on, you're really trying to not have a dry piece of history, and you're trying to articulate what it was like to be in that space. And that, obviously, you're on a storyboard or on a script, you can only do that so far. And so being able to, it's really is a work of translation. So taking that work and then being able to translate that into another image is the work of filmmaking. But for me personally, I'm most interested in being able to convey the emotion of what it must have felt like for these young men to experience what they did. And that to me is the hard part, is just having this sort of roller coaster of the different elements of the story combined with the history, but also this very much the sense and feeling of these young men being up in the air and how that must have felt. To me, that's the exciting part about putting the movie together.
And yeah, I guess that doubles up on my job as the animator, and it's about portraying all of those emotions that Fiona's talking about, feeling, getting those to visually hit from the animation. So to try and get that sense of isolation, fear, cold, panic, danger, all of these things, and then flip that over to the relief and the joy of coming home, making it back to the airbase, and then the sadness of losing your colleagues when that happens, the other members of the crew. And as Alex alluded to earlier, that happened a lot, and a lot of people were lost. And how do we do justice to their memory, to those stories, but still make it exciting in the moment without glorifying it or overly dramatizing it? I don't think we really need to overly dramatize it. They're 20-year-old kids flying gigantic boxes of steel being shot at, for hours at a time. The drama's there, but we don't want to glorify any of it, but we want to portray the reality of it. And it's a difficult thing to do in any medium, but the way that we've chosen to do it in the animation has made that a technical challenge as well as a storytelling challenge.
Oh, good. Well, let's take a break right here and take a look at a little more footage from the film, and we'll be back right after this.
Harrington Air Base was a dream beyond understanding. Green grass and lots of trees. We were housed in clean barracks with plenty of hot water and background music of Glenn Miller and Artie Shaw. The mess hall served the finest food in the Army, and Coca-Cola machines were everywhere. The surprises for the radio operators was receiving a GI wristwatch, plus sunglasses and a .45 caliber handgun. We went out to the flight line to inspect our new B-24 bomber. The plane smelt like a brand new car. All the features were tight and there were no patched holes. The entire crew seemed thrilled that this was the plane we would use to slay the dragon with. Archie McIntyre, radio operator, Gaines crew.
In mid-April, the group departs from the continental United States. The pilots receive sealed envelopes with their orders enclosed. Next stop, the European Theater of Operations. They were being sent to join the 8th Air Force in England, the mighty 8th. They traveled the southern route with stops in Trinidad and Tobago, Belém, Brazil, Fortaleza, Brazil, Natal, Brazil, Dakar, Senegal, Marrakesh, French Morocco, Nuts Corner, Ireland, and finally North Pickenham in the United Kingdom.
Somewhere along the way, John Foster lived outside of a little village in Missouri, and our route from Harrington, Kansas to West Palm Beach. Being right on our path, we dropped from 10,000 feet to 100 feet when we found this house, and we circled it. Of course, everybody came running out of the house, and Foster had an opportunity to wave to his family, who were very obviously there on the ground waving back. But little did we know that really was the last time he saw his family. And he was saying hello and goodbye at the same time.
And while we were in Trinidad, Brad found a sign painter and bribed him with a bottle of rum to paint the Silver Witch.
From Trinidad, we went down to Belém. Before crossing the Amazon, we let down through the clouds. Crossing the river was like going out over the ocean again. One of the islands seemed to be very red. I dropped the aircraft down and we buzzed the biggest bunch of flamingos you've ever seen. Robert Munson, pilot, 858th Bomb Squadron.
From Fortaleza to Dakar, we left at night to take advantage of celestial navigation. I took the first watch and was relieved by my co-pilot. I was really drowsy at dawn as the sun came up in front of us. Suddenly there was a tap on my shoulder, and when I turned around, I was looking right into an alligator's gaping mouth full of teeth. Our engineer, Zeke, had bought a whole alligator skin, head, teeth, and all. He had his hand in there chomping the mouth up and down and up and down. Believe me, I was wide awake from there into Dakar. Herc Taylor, pilot, 858th Bomb Squadron.
It was at Marrakesh that we saw our first B-29s. We lost a little overall with the B-29 ahead of us, didn't make it, crashing and burning before our eyes. Because there were so many planes waiting, we took off immediately, flying over the burning B-29, low enough to feel the heat. Herschel Smith, pilot, 859th Bomb Squadron.
We're talking with Alex, Justin, and Fiona, and they have, I would describe this as a labor of love, putting this film together. It's been a number of years, and I can also tell from all of your reactions that you've grown somewhat in your own understanding of World War II and veterans and things that took place during the war. And how has that journey been for each of you?
So for me, one of the most compelling things that I've learned was how brave, truly how brave these young men were. I got the honor of speaking with a lady called Tractor Annie who appears in our movie, and she was 17 at the time of the war, and her stories about how she had to deal with the coming in to the farm in England of these young men, and then the subsequent death that she had to deal with. That was tremendously moving to me. And she was just a young girl dealing with this extraordinary thing that had happened on her land just because it happened to be there. And at the same time as we got to experience being on the planes, just seeing how cold they must have been and how very little metal there was between these young men and the outside world. It was extremely I was just made extremely aware of how much they'd gone through, and therefore start thinking about, well, why did they do that, and how much the camaraderie must have been to really create a connection between them all. It was quite moving to hear how much they'd gone through.
Yeah, you really get an appreciation for I guess the development of not that it's more like the fact that in 1944 it required a crew of 10 men to deliver between 4 and 5 tons of bombs to deliver a payload, and then in just a matter of 30-40 years, a Warthog can fly with a pilot, sometimes a co-pilot, or usually a navigator of some sort, and can deliver twice that amount of payload, flying at ridiculously faster speeds. So you get I guess in that sense, you have an appreciation of what these guys went through. At 10,000 feet, they had to go on oxygen. The planes are usually flying at between 20 and 25,000 feet, which is 4 or 5 miles above the Earth, and it's cold up there. So they're wearing these heavy suits. That have half the time they're heated suits. They plug, and there's little places along the frame of the airplane, wherever they are, where they can plug in and get and it'll power up the heating suit. Half the time it doesn't work. Half the time it shorts out, and the guys are literally getting electrocuted by their own heating suits. The fact that, to me, the most remarkable thing is if the planes hit and they have seconds to get out of that plane with their parachutes. And the fact that they did, I mean, it's like adrenaline, right? I mean, they have to make that decision, and sometimes if the pilots have been disabled or killed, then they have to make that decision on their own, and they have to figure it out. And they look out the windows, and if they see something going on and they're trying to communicate with the officers at the front of the airplane and they're not getting that response, they have to then make that decision. What do we do? And so usually it's, let's get the hell out of here, because this thing's going to blow up, or it's going to crash, or something. It's going to be very, very bad. So yeah, just the fact that they managed to get out wearing these bulky suits, wearing all that stuff that they're wearing in these really confined spaces. You look at them from the outside, they look huge, but really when you're inside of them, they're not that comfortable. They're very tight, because everything's there for a reason, and there's no excess. You know what I'm saying? Like, here's your machine guns, and then here's the guns, the boxes that feed the 50 caliber, and that's it. I mean, there's nothing else. Nothing is spared. There's no luxuries, of course. So the fact that these guys could get out of those planes that quickly is really amazing to me. Yeah. And I will say one other thing that we think we're going to cover in our film, which has never been, I don't think it's been shown in any other documentary about World War II aviation, is the assembly of the bombers to do these massive air armadas in 1944 and 45. When the 8th Air Force, first started, they everything was from scratch. I mean, they were back in Washington and Alabama. They're drawing up these plans. So the assembly of these various bomb groups, there's 30 bomb groups in an area the size of New York City, maybe a little bit larger. And they're all putting up airplanes, 25 to 30 airplanes, B-17s, B-24s. The 9th Air Force is sending out their guys, which are the light, the B-25s, and the B-20s and 26s, the A-26s. So they're putting out their airplanes at the same time. And then at the same time as that's happening, the RAF is bringing in, they're flying back from their night missions. So there's a lot of traffic in the air. And so we're going to illustrate how the assembly of these aircrafts took place, animated, of course, and how that's remarkable. That so many planes got up in the air at any given time. By the late November, December, the 8th Air Force was capable of putting up 2,000 heavy bombers and 1,000 fighter escorters to go on missions into Europe. And wow, that's just an astonishing bit, just to get them up there, and then to not have them wreck into each other as they're assembling for their missions. So that's something that we're looking forward to showing the audience. Yeah, there is one observation or stylistic point that I'd like to show or illustrate, that we're going to go with a pretty modern soundtrack. So there won't be, any of the Tommy Dorsey band or any of the swing music from the 40s, which is extremely wonderful music and great music. But we are, again, trying to hook up those kids, those kids from today. So we're going to try to go with a pretty modern soundtrack to get them hooked into our film. And we're pretty confident we can get that happening. Engage these kids in the adventures of their now great grandparents.
Along with the music soundtrack that you were just talking about, we've got the animation, we have interviews, but you also did some on-location shooting, including with CAF's B-24 Diamond Lil.
Correct. That was a fun day for me personally. I had been wanting to do this for a very long time, and we finally managed to work with the B-29, B-24 Squadron, and those guys were just amazing. We showed up at 6:30. Crew call was 6:30. It was October 30th, the day before my dad's birthday, which is his birthday's on Halloween. So that was a kind of a cool thing going on there, and it was cold. It was nippy, it was late October, and it was cool. But by the time the sun came up, it was like not a cloud in the sky. Blue, I think the temperature was 70, 71, and the crew that I asked to work on this were friends and colleagues that I worked with here in Dallas on many shoots, and I just basically like begged them to come out and play with us, and they were so great. They said yes, of course, it's your project, it's your baby, of course we'll do it. And we had just a fantastic crew out there, and I was just so tickled. And of course, then we had all the actors that we cast remotely. So I was not able to see any of these people. I only did it through, the three of us looked at images and photos of these guys and said, okay, that guy could be this guy could be this guy, and so on and so forth. And the day that the guys were here, they were in the B-29 Squadron hangar, getting dressed up and everything. So that's where we set them up. And I walked over there with our behind the scenes photographer, and I says, let's go meet the guys, because I had never met them. We were still setting up for the shoot, and it was a moment when I like walked in and I'm like going, holy crap, the guys are here they are. And they were in their uniforms, their flight uniforms and stuff. And the guy who looked like my dad. This kid was, I don't know, he was a 23-year-old, 22-year-old actor portraying a 20-year-old man, Latino. And it was pretty neat. My brothers were like looking at him going, that looks like Dad. I'm like, well, yeah, I know. It's pretty cool. It's a cool moment, So that was fun. And man, the commemorative Air Force, those guys, the B-29, B-24 Squadron were so great. As we were shooting, we got some really cool photos for that day. So that was a blast. So yeah, that was the 30th mission for Crew 713. They've landed, and now they're getting their DFC medals, and they're getting pinned on that, and we're recreating that. Some of the photos that were taken that day in 1944, we basically recreated those images using Diamond Lil as a stand-in for the Irishman Shanty, and that was just a blast of a day. I was buzzing for like 2 or 3 days after that. I was tickled. So that was fun. Thank you, B-29, B-24 Squadron.
All right. Well, before we go any further, I want to let folks know that we'll be taking your questions. But before we do that, we want to show you a little bit of the beginning of Act 1 of the film. So we're going to take a look at that, and then when we come back, if you've got questions for Alex or Justin and Fiona, now will be your chance to do it. Just type those questions in the comment box, and we'll be back in just a moment to answer those.
This is my dad, Nemesio Mena. He's only 20 years old, and he's already experienced things, horrible things, that will stay with him for the rest of his life. And this is my dad in 2007. This photo was taken a few months before he died at the age of 84. In 1944, he had a remarkable series of adventures while serving as a radio operator on a B-24 Liberator bomber in World War II. Flying the heavy bombers was a job that was fraught with peril. Those who survived came back with stories to last a lifetime, wise old men like my father. Those who didn't, their bones lie scattered, hallowed ground, wherever they rest. This is my dad's crew. Dad is standing second from the left. This photo was taken on July 31st, 1944, after they had completed their 30th and final combat mission. These lucky bastards are going home. As a matter of fact, they've actually joined the ranks of the Lucky Bastards Club. All bomber crews who completed a successful combat tour were automatically added to the club. It was pretty exclusive because while my dad's crew completed a 30-mission combat tour, and that with a bit of luck, the average life expectancy of a World War II bomber crew serving in the European theater was about 12 missions, which is a mind-boggling fact. So where does one start a story about my dad and his crew, about the violent and hapless 492nd Bomb Group? All those men, all those stories.
So we already have some questions from the audience, so we'll get to those in just a moment. So seeing the opening sequence of the movie that we just saw, without giving up too much or giving too much away, explain the significance of them going to that mountain in Texas.
Yeah. So basically, when my father he was Roman Catholic, right? My entire family is Catholic. So when he was flying these missions, he made basically a pact with his creator, and he basically said that he would fly, he would climb that mountain 30 times for 30 missions. So they spared his crew all those 30 missions. So he climbed that mountain 30 times. He finally got a furlough after they finished their missions, and they went to he went back home to El Paso. I believe it was September or October of 1944, and he did that. He climbed the mountain. So the significance of that is that the man that's walking with him is his older brother Candelario, and according to a younger brother who also climbed the mountains with him, he says, well, they didn't do it every other day, or 2 days or so. Like, he says sometimes they'd go up and down the mountain 6 times. I mean, yeah, these guys were young. Yeah, my dad would have been 20, 21, and my uncle would have been 12 or 13. So yeah, but that was his way of saying thank you for sharing his life and his crew's life.
Also, one of the other questions that came in is, what's the significance of the name of the airplane, the Irishman's Shanty?
Yeah, so the Irishman Shanty was what happened is that the crew had been training, and I believe they were either training or they were already flying some missions, and there was the pilot, of course, Sullivan, and Crowley. There was a bombardier. McCarthy was one of the gunners, and so they were talking about their Irish background, and one of the other gunners chimed in and he said, you guys are just a bunch of shanty Irish, which calling somebody shanty Irish in the 40s is kind of an insult. And so but the crew all laughed, and so the co-pilot said, hey, well, why don't we call the plane Irishman Shanty? So that's where the name came from, Irishman Shanty. It's a cool story. It's in the film.
Very good. Yeah. And here's one for the history buffs. Our good friend Bill Foraker is asking, in one picture the crew shows 11, and in another picture it shows 10. What was the typical crew size for a B-24?
It was 10. 10 was the regular crew size. However, later on, as the war progressed, they could sometimes remove the ball turret gunner, and they would fly with 9. But the 10 was the usual complement. You had the pilot, the co-pilot, the bombardier, and the navigator, who were officers. And then you had the engineer, top turret, radio operator, 2 waist gunners, tail gunner, and a nose gunner, and a tail gunner. So that gives you 6 and 4. So it's usually 10. Yeah.
Yeah. I would imagine, and this is just anecdotal, is that any crew that we would have gone with 11, either someone who is an observer with that crew, watching, training with that crew, or someone who was just new to in country, who was flying along just to get kind of a feel for what they were about to experience.
Yeah, a lot of times there was crews that flew with extra, what they call observers, and sadly, sometimes those planes all went down with no survivors. It was just unfortunate that those observers happened to be on those planes. But a lot of times, what would happen is if a new pilot was coming in to the group, to a group, not just the 492nd, they would train him. So they would put him in the co-pilot seat, and that would bump the co-pilot usually out, so he would not fly that day. And then the new pilot would fly with the experienced crew and get to know, how to fly in formation and do all the other stuff that's necessary to the mission success and bringing that plane back and the crew as well.
Good. Justin was asking.
Sorry, Steve. I was
go
just
ahead,
going to say on that note, the significance for our crew in particular about the 11 and 10 is that there were a total of 11 men.
Yes.
I think it was their 7th mission. They suffered a horrific attack and almost lost the plane. Amazingly, O'Sullivan managed to get the plane back, but they did lose the navigator. He wasn't killed. He actually bailed out through miscommunication, and so he had to be replaced. So there were 11 men in total in Crew 713, just not all at once.
Right.
We tell that story in the movie. It's quite an achievement what they did there.
Yes, pretty dramatic.
Which also brings up the fact that, we've covered a lot of details about the movie in this 45 minutes to an hour that we've got, but there's a whole lot of other details and things that go into this, and for me in particular, and I hope for our audience too, we can't wait to see the finished product.
We can't either.
And this is probably for Justin and Fiona. Tad had actually a really good observation regarding the use of graphic novel animation, because comic books were very popular in the years leading up to World War II. There are probably some Foot Lockers with a Superman comic book or something in it, and so what comes around goes around. This is kind of fascinating to see that this is, graphic novels are now catching on with young people. And what do you think the World War II veterans would think of or think about that? If we told them today, it's like, yeah, those comic books you had before the war, they're really popular now again.
Well, that didn't factor into our decision.
Right.
It is a wonderful little historical tidbit, though, to think that, yes, we've taken something that was very popular, and as it's now, again, as you say, becoming more popular, we've taken those kids who were reading them and put them in one of their own. I think that they would probably find that kind of funny, to think that they were in comics when you think about what the comics were about at that time as well, superheroes and other, cowboys and detectives, people who were exciting, and they just thought they were doing their thing, and now they're in a comic book of their own.
You mentioned using some written words of interviews with veterans that have been in books and things, and then using the younger actors to voice that to make it sound, to bring us back in history as how they would have been telling that story when it happened. What are some of the, if you can remember offhand, what are some of the books or magazines or something that our audience might want to go track down to read more?
Oh yeah. So there's this book called 89 Days by Russell Ives, which is very, very rare book, hard to find. Reluctant Witness is a great book on the 492nd Bond Group. There's an Alan Blue wrote a book. I'm gonna have to reach up and look at it. It's right above me. Yeah, there's like around 9 or 10 books that were written about the 492nd Bomb Group that were able to draw The Fortunes of War. That's the book by Alan Blue. It's a wonderful history. It's the very first history of the 492nd Bomb Group. It was published in 1967 and then reissued again in '78. And it's just a really good factual history of this bomb group.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of your library and reaching up to see it to grab a book, one of our audience members commented that they really liked looking at your library. It looks very much like their library at home, so it felt very much at home.
I'm a book nerd. I'm a book guy.
There you go. Fiona, I know you'd like to get in a few words about how we can all maybe help push this project toward the finish line.
Well, I would just say if you've liked anything that you've seen today, we would love to show you the whole movie, and the way that you can do that is supporting the movie. If you go to Crew 713, www.crew713.com, you can see a support page. We are so excited to get this film finished. We're on the last stages. We've got some more of the animation to do. We've got the final edit to put together, and then we've got all the sound to do. And so we're just ready to show this entire film to you all. We'd love to do it. Yes. The same time Alex mentioned, Masters of the Air is coming out, so we know there's going to be a great deal of interest in this story as we move on, and it's going to become a story that is of interest. So yeah, we just love it. If anybody wants to support us or help to make this movie more of a reality.
Yeah. All right. What's that website again?
It's www.crew713.com.
There you go. Con Kelly is wondering, did the Shanty crew ever claim any enemy fighters?
Yes. On their 7th mission, where they almost were down. One of the gunners, his electrical, I mentioned the electrical suit, it's shorted out, so they sent him up to the front of the airplane where it's warmer, and the bombardier came out, because the way they trained the men is that you had to be able to run several different positions, so they all had to be to get their flying gunner license. So the bombardier actually manned one of the waist guns, and as they were being attacked, he recorded a kill. He shot down an enemy aircraft, and that was, in order to get that, another aircraft or somebody else has to corrobate it, and so that actually happened on their 7th mission. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Did they record what aircraft that they encountered most often? Air to air?
No, I think I mean a lot of Focke-Wulfs and what was the big airplanes that the enemy was throwing up there at the time. On their last mission, their 30th mission, they did encounter a couple of Me-262s, which zoomed by. They had already dropped their payload. They were on their way back. And as they were on their way back, the enemy zoomed by them. 2 jets flew by them, but did not engage, which is interesting. So were they out of? Were they already expended their fuel, or were they already expended their armament? Who knows? But they did actually see a 2 Me-262s, which engaged them on their 30th mission, which is interesting. Yeah.
And this is really digging deep. Any reason why there was no nose art other than the name of the airplane?
Yes. So they had decided they were going to put the Irishman Shanty on the nose of the plane, and they were going to do it in script, right? But they just got thrown into so many of the missions early that they could never find the time to do it. And so, yeah, unfortunately, the Irishman Shanty never did get any nose art put on. The idea was there. My dad did tell me that they did plan it, but they just never got around to it. And then, hey, they got their 30 missions, and they they went home. The Shanty, when the 492nd broke up, the planes were dispersed to different groups. So the Shanty was dispersed to the 467th bomb group, where I'm happy to say the plane flew a total of 75 combat missions. And to the best of my knowledge, I've talked to folks in the 467th. No one was ever injured on any of those 75 missions. It's a remarkable record for an airplane. It's luck, but it's still pretty amazing.
Well, and considering the history of that bomb group, that's even more remarkable.
Yes, yeah. There was other folks that flew the Shanty, and as well, and they had great success with it. So we're happy.
Good. Justin, Fiona, any final thoughts before we wrap up tonight?
Well, I think thank you to the CAF. Honestly, it's been such a pleasure getting to know everybody in the process of making this film, and just learning about everything that you all do has just been so much fun. You're such a brilliant organization. So I just our thanks for being friends and partners of our film.
Yes. Yeah, I do want to say a special thank you to Blaine, to you, Steve, to Leah Block, for hosting us, for having us here, and certainly to the CAF, the Commemorative Air Force, and to our dear and wonderful friends over at the B-29, B-24 Squadron. I just can't say enough about how much I really greatly appreciate everything they've done for us. It's been a wonderful thing.
And there have been a number of B-29, B-24 squadron members who have put their appreciation in the comment section as well.
Yes,
and it was fun to work with.
Yes, yeah,
as well.
Wonderful.
All
folks.
right, and for folks who want to keep up with the movie when it's released, where it'll be released, one more time for the website.
Yeah, so www.crew713.com. So behind you, you'll on Alex's board. That's if you just punch that in, you'll find us.
Yeah, and we're also on Instagram, and we have a Facebook page. Crew 713 is on Facebook, and I do want to say one thing, because if I don't say it, some of the other folks that have worked on my film will say something. So everything that you've seen tonight, the advanced stuff, the screenings and everything, the film has not been color corrected. There's not been a proper sound mix, sound effects mix. It was what we call a fine rough cut. So when the finished product is done, it's going to look and sound a lot better. We know it's going to, but it was good. It was good to show tonight. We're really happy.
We just want to give folks a taste of what's to come.
Absolutely. That's it. All
right.
Thank you, guys.
Justin, Fiona, Alex, thank you for spending some time with us tonight. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to keeping track of Crew 713 and looking forward to the finished product.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right, and thank you for joining us tonight. We had a great audience and some great questions as well. Remember, if you have any ideas for future topics, just send Leah Block an email at media@cafhq.org. Until next time, thank you for being here. I'm Steve Buss for the Commemorative Air Force. Have a good night.
Thank you.